What is up, everybody? It is time for the April 2024 Top Ops Dissected. I am not even going to say what date it is because I am extremely behind on this video. But fortunately, all with good things. A lot of stuff, of course, a lot of GME AMC opportunities, a lot of making that big video. So nevertheless, I am sorry for the delay on this, but let's dive into it. As I tweeted, April 24 Top Ops. In my view, April was an active month, but by no means an exceptional one. It still would have been a good month compared to past years, but it's just that this year we've seen so much activity, and that has actually continued to happen in May. So overall, if I had to think about it, this year is probably shaping up to be about a 7 and a 10, 7 out of 10, I would think, maybe even like a 7.5. None of it has been so insane epic craziness like we saw in 2020, but damn if there have been good ops pretty much every month. This past month in April, I think the best home run op was GL by a long shot. Although I think if I had to pick the easiest layup, kind of like the least scary single to hit, the easy money trade, if you will, that would probably be the ARM $100 20 breakdown. We are going to get to all of these listed and more, so let's dive in. The first one on my list is DJT. Really, more than any specific instance, I really wanted to just touch on this from a variety of perspectives. First of all, this stock is obviously super run up from back in January. Everybody knows that towards the beginning of last month, they were kind of doing the ticker transformation and everything. And so ahead of some of that excitement, we really gapped up, and that was like a big daily breakout, but then we kind of failed overall. That was also a massive volume capitulation. So I think when that happens, it's totally reasonable to start to think big picture, like could that have been the top given that volume capitulation? So while there was no specific place I really wanted to hone in on, I wanted to just address this from multiple perspectives. So first of all, if you recognize that like, oh my God, like that was a super euphoric capitulation, like this is kind of the big catalyst that now it's kind of the DJT ticker and everything, that's where you can start to do a daily swing once prior bar lows get broken. That could be initiated at around the low 60s. So that ended up working incredibly well. The other way that you also could have gotten involved, and I'd say probably the second possibility, is that next day, there was actually kind of a sneaky filing that like the company is actually just, you know, bleeding money out of its ass. And so not a lot of people caught on to that filing until midday once the move was kind of already happening. But that was a really bad sign for the fundamentals of the company. And here's actually, I think maybe my most interesting and maybe favorite of the three possible entries. Again, not that I thought that any of these were so amazing, but I just think it's worth considering. Like whenever you see a huge move like that, you do want to reverse engineer these things and be like, okay, how could I have captured this? And what I think is interesting is on that big news day, we essentially went from $60 down to 45 bucks. And then in the 3 days following that, we can't bounce really whatsoever. Those are two very shitty bars. That makes me think, oh man, this could have continuation. And when this rolls over so tightly, I think that break of $45 where we open below there, that's a totally valid entry for a swing continuation play. Whether you were short from the break of daily prior bar lows after that huge capitulation day, or maybe on that news, or maybe when we can't bounce after such a total melt, any of those entries end up pretty reasonable. And this held prior bar highs very well for the swing traders out there. I also want to note that where that cover is on the yellow circle, given the length and breadth of this down move, I don't think it's that crazy to initiate a long, like a swing long there either, giving it to prior bar lows and then capturing a couple days. I know a couple friends, well, mainly one friend and I, we've kind of been experimenting with some of those setups on some of those pullbacks that then reverse, and I think that's worth thinking about. None of these were so amazing, but a loss, it's just worth your consideration. So now let's dive into Tesla. So Tesla actually showed a couple opportunities, but I'll kind of just stick to some of the simplest ones. As I've touched on before, towards the beginning of each month, they always have their delivery numbers. These tend to always be at 9 a.m. and these delivery numbers were not so great. So obviously this stuff moves fast. You don't have the greatest liquidity pre-market, but nevertheless, news catalyst that then holds prior bar highs very well. This has happened many times. So it's just worth touching on again. But then even a couple days later, Tesla again had an interesting news headline where midday it came out that they were scrapping their plans for a low-cost car. You know, that's not a good thing, because that's something Tesla's been hyping up for quite some time. Really, I try not to overinterpret the news. Trader instinct says, uh-oh, that's no good. You short, and then prior bar highs again work pretty damn well. Not that this is some massive chop, but I do think both these plays pretty reasonable to make if you're a news trader as far as that headline game. Then we get to Golf Lima on April 11th. This was the Fuzzy Panda research short. I'm not actually going to dissect this just because we covered this play so much. I have the public video, the quick GL trade review, and then I also covered this in one of my AMAs. So please just refer to those resources, because both of those, I kind of touched on this quite a bit. All the information is in there. So that brings us to BTC on April 12th, 2024. And this play also wasn't so crazy. This was just a pretty basic capitulation. The stock had been weak over the course of the day. We start to have bigger and bigger legs. Then we roll over and break the 67,500 or so lows. And then that's when it really accelerates. And most notably, we get really big volume capitulation. This is one of those situations where, because the bars don't set up so well for the break of prior bar highs, I would be more open to buying the intra-bar turn. Again, this is a concept I have touched on before about when it's justified to buy intra-bar versus waiting for those turns. This is also something that's a fun thought experiment to derive on your own. What are the situations when I want to buy an intra-bar turn and give it to intra-bar lows? When are the situations when I want to wait for the bar turn? Really good experiment. It's very important to do, and this falls in that category of buying intra-bar. Nothing crazy here. Prior bar lows do hold up pretty good, and this makes for just a nice single. One thing that I do want to touch on with this play is I had some friends that were a little bit scared of buying into this, and the thing to recognize is, yes, Bitcoin is very volatile. Yes, there's a lot of leveraged players, but I think the more institutionalized this gets, the more the volatility kind of contracts and condenses. So if you're scared of those like 10% mega epic flush outs like Bitcoin used to have, where it just goes 10% on a wick in a straight line. Not that nothing can't happen, obviously anything can happen, but really, because there's so much arbitrage and so much money flow, and you're able to access this as equity, as futures on all the exchanges, Coinbase, wherever, I really don't think you need to be as scared of the tail wicks as you needed to be, especially when this really wasn't so overextended or bought up into the move. So for all those reasons, I was pretty interested in this sharp sell-off. And now we're going to get to gold. So gold, I actually didn't even touch this one because I was doing something that day, but I know people like good old Alvin, who helps me produce these videos, was able to catch this, which is amazing growth on his part. A couple things here. So first, gold big picture had broken out above, like, I think it was like 192-ish. The things to think on is even this move, which I'm really going to be focusing on the capitulation overall on an intraday basis, but you want to think like what led to that capitulation, and if you look back, really you have a beautiful breakout where even on this weekly chart, it was just very nicely consolidating. 192 was highs for a really long time, for years now. And so I think if you're a swing trader, it's totally worth considering buying that breakout. And if on the right side, we look at the daily chart, even on the daily, it was a beautiful breakout, and you can swing that long and use prior bar lows and catch a really nice swing move. So even though I'm really highlighting the short in this because that was probably the best opportunity, if you're a swing trader or even thinking about getting into that stuff, this was one of those setups where when you reverse engineer it, you're like, okay, like I see why this went so well. I see why this led to a capitulation, and how could I have captured it? And I think this was actually fairly capturable. I don't do too much of the breakouts nowadays. The trend is your friend at the end of the day. We always want to try to be as with the trend as possible. The easiest, most money is always made with the trend. When capturing the short, you should also be asking, how could I have captured the long and been win with this move to begin with? Alas, the point I really want to talk about though is April 12th, the very big wick and the very big volume bar on that daily chart. And so what had been happening is the way I look at this on the daily is we broke out of 192 in GLD. We went to about 202 or so, consolidated really nicely to that moving average. That's a beautiful consolidation, exactly what we want to see. We break out, and if our first leg was about 10 points, not only do we go more than 10 points, points, but we almost double that in that next leg. This daily never gets so overextended. Like, I don't think this daily is an A+, but certainly on that specific day, we start to really accelerate and go above that Bollinger Band. And now we're really far from that original breakout, right? If the original breakout was 192, we're in just a couple of weeks, 10% higher, which for something like gold is a pretty damn big move. The other interesting part was usually silver is a much higher beta than gold. I mean, beta is kind of a weird term to use there because it's not moving with the market, but generally silver is a bigger mover and highly correlated to gold. But really gold had been making the same size move as silver, which was kind of a sign in itself that, wow, maybe this gold is getting ahead of itself. Now let's jump into the intraday. The other thing that's interesting is this fell on a Friday. So again, 0 DTEs come into play, especially interesting with gold because in general, it just isn't that volatile. So some of these went up quite a fair amount. When I look at this intraday, what's so notable to me is this held the moving average really nice off the open. We were steady, strong. This opening drive, it actually reminds me of NVIDIA on that exhaustion gap day. That is a really important analogy to make. Both NVIDIA and GLD, they did these moves on Fridays. Both of these were really high volume. Both kind of started strong and you're thinking, oh, maybe this isn't the day. But once they crack, then it's really lights out and you want to attack that backside. So I think probably the first, I don't really want to short anything as long as we're holding above the moving average. Despite us not capitulating, that break of the moving average is probably the first potential entry. I don't think I would be so convinced or go nuts there, but once we really break into 11:30 a.m. and we break to lows, that is the signal that, wow, now we're backside. Something different is going on today. Then when we consolidate beautifully to the moving average and break to lows, that second blue circle, that I think is actually, that's the spot. That's where you really go for it, mostly because of the daily, and now we're backside intraday. So that is just such a defined place. It doesn't have insane skew because again, this is just gold, but to make 4 points, if you catch that leg lower, that's a really awesome move. Again, I don't think this GLD was some mega home run, like at all. I don't think this was so obvious. I don't think the daily was so great, but I do think the daily was good enough to be watching it. And I do think this intraday is worth ever noting as a comparison to that NVIDIA top day. Yeah, overall, really worth thinking about. It's still not lost on me how many of these moves so far this year are all cracking on Fridays. Again, I brought this up before. I'm very convinced this is because of the tail wagging the dog as far as the options market has become so big and active these days. If we look through things, I mean, we're talking about what, like SMCI this year, we're talking about MSTR on the Kerrisdale, this GLD, the NVIDIA. There's been a lot of big major ops that are cracking on these. So you need to always have some imagination as long as this trend tends to continue. So that's gold for you. Now we're going to move on to ARM 4-1724. And so this I thought was a pretty easy layup, or at least very much so worth studying. Why do I like this ARM so much? So what I love is this did a mega capitulation back in February. This was during the SMCI craze. The other thing, not that I want to go too much into fundamentals and not that I weigh that too much, but ARM is the most expensive and overvalued of these semiconductors by far. It is not even close. The valuation on ARM is just absolutely head spinning. I don't think any of that whole up move would have occurred whatsoever if it wasn't for the SMCI NVIDIA mania. Nevertheless, that capitulation did. And so the general Lance theory that once something mega capitulates, unless there's fresh news, it really tends to not make highs for a really long time. And I tend to be short biased, or not short biased, but just counter biased, I guess, counter trend. What we see ARM do is then make a series of lower highs, and we start to set up against support of $120. Then we start to get really tight against that level. And what was interesting is going into this breakdown, SMCI and NVIDIA were strong the prior day. This ARM could not go up whatsoever the prior day. Then we end up breaking that $120 level. The beauty of this, which I'm going to get to once I get to the intraday, is is this really aligned pretty well. Intraday chart was a beauty, aligning with that $120 level. So there's two ways to play this as well. Because this is a daily setup, in general, what I say is if it's an intraday setup, I want to be trading it using an intraday stop and entry and everything else. I need an intraday setup. For a daily setup, which is what this is, I'm mostly focused on this $120 breakdown. I really want to trade the daily chart for that. In general, I want to short 120 or so and give prior bar highs on that daily, and that ends up making a beautiful, 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 beautiful move. You knew this stock was probably going to do something awesome just because of how much we melted on day one. That is a mega awesome sign that I really want to side with holding this, and it really paid out. Now we're going to dissect this on the intraday. And so what we can see is we made kind of a little quick drive lower off the open. We roll over, we break that 120, and then it is just bye-bye. So we can also short that on an intraday basis. Yes, prior bar highs is a good stop for this. We break prior bar highs by just like potentially a couple pennies there, but it's not really like a true break of any emotion or any bounce. We're kind of just steadily going down and holding down. This is actually really exactly what you want to see. So it doesn't surprise me that we kind of just melted the whole day, because nowhere did we have any attempt at a bounce. If you're longing the stock despite the breakdown, you got zero relief. Like literally the biggest bounce all day was just potentially 1 to 2 points, despite this thing just epic melting. Those are all really important nuances that says this stock is probably going to continue to puke. So overall, this arm was really great from a swing trading short. This arm was really great from an intraday short. And most of all, I think it's important to note the nuances as far as that price action once that thing breaks. It is just game over, lights out. We've discussed this before, but just in case, I'll always bring this up again. You might be wondering, how do you find some of these setups? One, this stock is so in play that I just never really stopped watching it, and that kind of tends to do pretty well. Like most of the stocks making the best moves are the ones that are already in play. The other thing I would say, and I've discussed this many times before, if you do not have a daily chart scanner, I highly recommend them. The one I use is stockfetcher.com. I think it's like $120 a year, like something stupid affordable in the grand scheme of things. Insanely robust for daily chart scanning. Not for intraday scanning, does nothing for that. But as far as daily chart scanning, it is very robust. You can do a lot of cool things, and I have a lot of filters through there. Definitely, this is something you want to be on top of. Now we will get to PRI. This is April 18th, and this had a bear cave short report. And so this is interesting. PRI is another insurance company, and this is coming after the GL Global Life saga. Although this is a different short boutique research firm, you need to be aware of all of these. And if you're not compiling that Evernote database, you need to be, because we have touched on that so many times. So Bear Cave kind of jumps on the bandwagon and says, oh, this PRI is a short for a lot of the same reasons that GL was a short that Fuzzy Panda Research said. If you see that, like, market context is so important. If this report came out in a vacuum, in no way would I necessarily give it much credence. But when this short report comes out a week or two after Golf Lima, you need to go for this. It is so asymmetric in your favor, given that GL essentially imploded 50% plus. You really want to have the benefit of the doubt. You really want to be prepared for this. A lot of this is part of that nuance that I say is just market context, right? When GL melts and this happens a week or two later, the market's going to be so much more scared of this than, say, before the GL report or after GL now having pretty much fully bounced for the most part. So you can catch a beautiful leg using prior bar highs. This stock ends up retracing almost all the way back, but who gives a shit? That is the beauty of day trading. You can catch the leg and then be gone. Then this is also the beauty of no man's land. Nowhere did this stock end up setting up later for any types of shorts, right? We never broke those $185 lows. So that is a total beauty. You catch the main leg, you skip all the paper cuts. That system works for a reason. This play, I can't emphasize enough. I don't know, maybe as far as simplicity, like this is a really damn good play. It's just so asymmetric if you can get to the stock and connect those dots. Market context and the power of analogy is so strong. That is so much of what day trading is. And this really is a beauty. And I think a lot of people probably sleep on this opportunity, but yeah, this was damn good as far as an easy layup. Now we're gonna do ANVS. This is on April 29th. And this is also an important thing that I don't think we've covered too much, but this stock was halted and then they came out with data. It is a biotech, so they came out with data for one of their drugs. I don't think we've touched on this in any review yet, but probably one of the most respected biotech analysts is this dude, Adam Feuerstein. He is a writer for Stat News. He used to work for CNBC and the Street website, I recall. But this is someone that really everybody should be following on Twitter. Very good grasp of price action and markets and biotech. And not only that, but he also each year on Stat News, I'm sure he still does this, he does like this biotech scorecard with upcoming catalysts. And that's a great way to research what catalysts you might want to be prepared for. But anywho, so this stock gaps up pretty big on data. We start to pair off and then pair some of the gains. Then Feuerstein essentially tweets out something, I mean, I'd have to pull up the tweet, but essentially the data being total bullshit and that they kind of just manipulated the data and the yardsticks and that the study was just totally trash. Once he tweets that out, it is just game over for the stock. You've got a news catalyst, you're going with the trend now, which is down. If you can short on the tweet, fantastic. But even that crossover below the unaffected price is also an amazing place to add or initiate around like the 15 bucks. And you end up catching a beautiful move. That is the power of in-place stocks. That is the power of simple systems. That is the power of being informed. Overall, like the liquidity on this wasn't great, but it's really important to familiarize yourself with Feuerstein as well as recognize, okay, there's a lot of ways to attack some of these stocks. Now for the final trade on this, we will go into the weed declassification. If you recall, I think it was back in August of 23, we did that initial headline, which was the belief that weed would be declassified and lowered as far as the scheduled drug and everything. And so a lot of that ended up being somewhat priced into this. Like if this headline came out back in August, all those stocks would just epic exploded. By the time this headline has come out, the market's kind of really highly anticipating this. Nevertheless, this is a huge catalyst. Like MSOS is hyper liquid. So if you can get to that headline and capture this, oh man, it's just such incredible liquidity to be able to just home run this stock. We know it's a big catalyst just because of how much it moved last time. That's the power of also having notes and data on some of this. And simple as can be, you want to buy the headline as quick as you can, then just use prior bar lows. And that works out very well. We never really like break to highs. By that time, it's kind of just the market closed. So then we're just in no man's land. So again, it's another simple pattern where we have breaking news headline holds prior bars, then we just remain in no man's land, and there's no reason to really counter or fade any of that. So you make your buck, wham bam, thank you ma'am, and that's it. So overall, those are the April ops. Obviously in May, I've got this other video coming up. We saw some huge stuff in GME and AMC. We saw some other plays in there. FFIU is a big one. Overall, man, it's really been a pretty consistently active year. I think like especially as we approach mid-year, I'll probably touch on this in the future, but it's so important to like be doing these monthly reviews and thinking, am I really capitalizing on these situations? Not every year is going to be like this. Who knows what the rest of the year will hold, but man, has it been good. And if you're not capitalizing, like, okay, that's fine. All we want to really focus on is learning. Why are you not connecting? What systems can you put in place to connect quicker and better or faster? If you're connecting and you're seeing a lot of green, like some of the SMB guys are starting to really connect and have their breakout years and everything. If you're starting to do well and show a lot of green, if the market stays good, you can't be afraid to start to really gradually, safely push size. But if you're having 20K month, 20K month, 20K month, it's time to push for a 25 or 30K month. You don't want to stand still while the market stays hot, and hopefully it just stays like that. So any questions, let me know. Hope all of this helps. And as always, usual disclaimers apply. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next month.